The air in the grand gala hall was electric, thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the low, constant hum of 1,000 conversations. For Xiao Zhan, it was a night he had worked a lifetime for. He had been a nominee for the most prestigious acting award of his career, a testament to years of quiet, tireless dedication. When his name was announced as the winner, the roar of the crowd was a physical wave that hit him. He accepted the trophy with a practiced, professional smile, his posture perfect, his gaze steady. As he walked to the podium, he was a beacon of grace, the living embodiment of every professional headline ever written about him. In the audience, a few seats away from the stage, Wang Yibo watched. He was a quiet, unreadable force in a sleek, black suit, his expression as carefully curated as his minimalist style. He had been a witness to Xiao Zhan's journey, the long, lonely nights of filming, the silent struggles, the unflagging work ethic that no one else saw. He had watched from a distance, a silent, powerful anchor in a sea of public opinion and professional chaos. To the world, he was just a fellow star in the audience, an unmoving statue of cool detachment. But to Xiao Zhan, he was the one person whose presence in the room made every single award, every single moment of success, feel real. The mind-blowing scene began not with a grand gesture, but with a quiet, breathtaking change in demeanor. Xiao Zhan stood at the podium, a masterpiece of professional poise. He started with the usual thank yous, his voice clear and resonant. Thank you to the director, to the crew, and to the fans who have supported me. It was all very professional, very much what the media expected. But then he paused. The smile on his face, which had been so polite and practiced, began to waver. His eyes, which had been scanning the crowd, finally landed on a single person. They locked onto Wang Yibo, and in that moment, the entire world outside of them faded into a distant hum. The cameras, which had been capturing every mundane moment of the ceremony, pivoted as one, their lenses trained on Xiao Zhan's face, a canvas of profound and unguarded emotion. A single tear, a diamond of vulnerability, escaped the corner of his eye and traced a silent path down his cheek. He didn't even try to wipe it away. His voice, which had been so clear and strong, dropped to a low, raw, and deeply personal whisper that was amplified by the microphone. He was no longer speaking to the crowd. He was speaking directly to Wang Yibo. "I want to thank a person," Xiao Zhan began, his voice cracking with emotion, "for being the quiet force that gave me the strength to stand here tonight. For being the only one who truly understood what it was to be alone in the noise. For waiting patiently when I couldn't speak, when I couldn't breathe. For never letting go, even when I had to. And for being a sanctuary, a home, in the middle of a storm." He looked at Wang Yibo, and a small, genuine, and utterly beautiful smile touched his lips, a smile that was a world away from the professional one he had worn a moment before. "Thank you," he finished, the words now so soft they were barely audible. "For everything." The public, watching live, was in a collective state of stunned silence. It wasn't a vague thank you. It wasn't a professional courtesy. It was a direct, public, and undeniable declaration. A silent, beautiful confession of his reliance on Wang Yibo's love and support. The raw, unfiltered emotion on his face, the single tear, the tremor in his voice. It was a complete and utter loss of control, a public display of a private, intimate truth that shattered every headline, every narrative, every lie they had ever told. The live broadcast ended abruptly, the moment too potent to be ignored. The video clip went viral instantly. The caption on every clip, in a dozen different languages, wasn't about the award he had won, but about the profound, unscripted confession he had just made. The world, which had thought of them as just a couple of friends, now saw them as something else entirely. It saw them as a single, unbreakable unit, a sanctuary in a world that was too loud. The climax unfolded hours later, in the quiet sanctuary of their car. The world outside was celebrating his bravery, his public declaration. Xiao Zhan, still feeling a deep, mortifying embarrassment, sat next to Wang Yibo, who, despite the long night, looked more at peace than he ever had. "You didn't have to do that," Xiao Zhan finally murmured, his voice soft and slightly shaky with emotion. You basically told them everything." Wang Yibo reached out and gently took his hand. "I didn't do it for them, Zhanji," he said, his voice low and confident. "I did it because I'm not afraid anymore. The speech was just a mirror. The real story is us. And the most powerful love stories are the ones that don't need a script. The final, breathtaking truth of their love story wasn't a grand, dramatic confession or a hidden symbol. It was the simple, beautiful fact that their love had become a source of peace, a quiet, unwavering force that had transformed their fear into courage. They had, in the end, not just revealed a secret. They had set themselves free. The video of Xiao Zhan's emotional thank you had not just gone viral, it had become a cultural phenomenon. It was a silent, powerful confirmation of a truth the public had long suspected. The collective gasp of the audience, the single tear on Xiao Zhan's face, the quiet intensity of Wang Yibo's gaze, it all created a new reality. Their love, once a professional liability, had become a source of profound strength, and a major entertainment company, recognizing this shift, decided to make a bold, unprecedented move. They proposed a collaboration that, in the past, would have been an absolute impossibility. A full-length album and a series of short films, a shared project that would showcase their chemistry, not as actors, but as artists. The mind-blowing scene began quietly, in the sterile high-tech environment of a recording studio. In the past, they would have been guarded, professional, and entirely separate. But now, in this new reality, something different unfolded. As Wang Yibo laid down a complex, intricate beat for a new song, Xiao Zhan sat across from him, his face a study in effortless concentration. They didn't need to talk. They didn't need to discuss notes. Xiao Zhan would simply close his eyes, listening to the rhythm, and a small, quiet smile would touch his lips. He would then, without a word, lean in and begin to hum a melody, a perfect, beautiful counterpoint to the beat Wang Yibo was crafting. The sound engineer, a seasoned professional who had worked with the biggest names in the industry, was stunned into silence. He had never seen such seamless, unspoken, artistic synchronicity. They were not just two artists collaborating. They were two halves of a single, creative soul, communicating through a language only they understood. It was a silent, beautiful symphony of trust and love. The most mind-blowing scene of all unfolded during the first rehearsal for their joint live performance. The stage was empty, a vast, silent space where a single beam of light illuminated them both. They were not performing for an audience. They were performing for each other. Wang Yibo, a master of cool, controlled movements, was practicing a dance sequence, a powerful, intricate set of steps. But something was off. He was too tense, too rigid. He was focused on the technical perfection of the movements, and it showed. Xiao Zhan, watching from the side, didn't say anything. He didn't offer a single word of criticism. Instead, in a quiet, unscripted moment, he simply walked over and placed his hand on Wang Yibo's back, a gentle, solid, and reassuring presence. In that simple touch, the tension drained from Wang Yibo's body. He smiled a small, genuine smile, and then, with a newfound fluidity, he began the dance again. This time, his movements were not just powerful, they were graceful, effortless, and full of a quiet, emotional depth that had never been there before. The choreographers, the producers, and the directors who were watching were not just witnessing a perfect performance. They were witnessing a love story that was being told in the silent language of two bodies moving as one. The final scene, a masterpiece of quiet domesticity, unfolded in a simple, unguarded moment in their apartment, a world away from the noise and the cameras. They were sitting together, their phones quiet, their world a tranquil silence. They had seen the news reports. The reviews had been glowing. The collaboration had been a massive success, a commercial and critical masterpiece. They were being called brave, courageous, pioneers. The world was celebrating their public love. But their love, in the end, was never for the public. It was for them. Xiao Zhan, with a quiet, contented sigh, leaned his head against Wang Yibo's shoulder, his eyes closed. "The world thinks we're brave for what we just did," he murmured, his voice soft with emotion. "For putting our love into our art." Wang Yibo didn't answer right away. He just tightened his arm around Xiao Zhan, a silent, powerful confirmation of his love. "The world didn't see our love, Zhanji," he finally said, his voice low and confident. "They saw our art. But the art was just a mirror. The real bravery was never for them. It was for us." The final, breathtaking truth of their love story wasn't a grand, dramatic confession or a hidden symbol. It was the simple, beautiful fact that their love had become a source of peace, a quiet, unwavering force that had transformed their fear into courage. They had, in the end, not just revealed a secret. They had set themselves free. The silence on the racetrack was a heavy blanket, muffling the roar of the crowd and the frantic energy of the pit crew. Wang Yibo, his hands still trembling with the adrenaline of the win, stared down at the small, broken piece of helmet in his palm. It wasn't just a trophy, it was a relic, a silent testament to a moment that had changed everything. He remembered the day with a clarity that felt almost supernatural, a scene replaying in his mind like a vivid, haunting film. The film set had been a blur of controlled chaos. The air, thick with the scent of dust and sweat, hummed with anticipation. They were filming the climax of the big fight scene, a dangerous sequence that required a high-wire stunt. Xiao Zhan, in his elaborate robes, had been a picture of ethereal grace as he was hoisted into the air. He looked like an ancient warrior, poised for battle, his gaze focused and intense. Yibo had been on the ground, his own part of the scene finished, but he couldn't tear his eyes away. He watched as Xiao Zhan was lifted higher and higher, the cables groaning with the strain. The director yelled, "Action!" and Xiao Zhan performed the choreographed movements with a dancer's precision, his body a fluid extension of the fight. Then, a sound that cut through the noise of the set, a sharp, metallic snap. It was a sound that would haunt Yibo's nightmares for years to come. The wire, frayed from a previous scene, had finally given way. Time seemed to slow down. Yibo saw it all in excruciating detail. The shock on Xiao Zhan's face, the sudden, unnatural lurch of his body, the panicked shouts of the crew. But his mind didn't register the chaos. It registered one thing and one thing only, the terrifying, gravity-fueled plummet of the person he had come to care for more than he ever thought possible. Without a second thought, without any calculation of risk or consequence, Yibo moved. It wasn't a conscious decision, it was a primal instinct, a reaction born from a deeper, unspoken bond. He lunged forward, a blur of motion, his body screaming in protest. The crew members around him scattered, but Yibo's eyes were locked on Xiao Zhan, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. He reached him just as he was about to hit the ground. The impact was brutal, the force of Xiao Zhan's fall amplified by his speed. Yibo's shoulder took the brunt of it, the pain a searing fire that momentarily stole his breath. He stumbled, but his arms remained locked around Xiao Zhan's waist, his body shielding him from the hard-packed earth. For a moment, they were a tangled mess on the ground, the world a cacophony of panicked voices and the frantic buzzing of cameras. But all Yibo could hear was Xiao Zhan's ragged gasp, the shudder of his body in his arms. He held him tighter, his own pain a distant throb compared to the overwhelming relief of knowing he was safe. The moments that followed were a blur of worried faces, paramedics, and hushed questions. Yibo had simply held on, refusing to let go until he was sure Xiao Zhan was all right. Later, in the quiet of a makeshift medical tent, they sat together. The doctors had confirmed no serious injuries for either of them, just a few scrapes and a strained shoulder for Yibo. It was in that quiet space, away from the prying eyes of the crew, that a different kind of conversation unfolded. Xiao Zhan, his face pale with shock, had looked at Yibo with a mixture of awe and bewilderment. "Why?" he had asked, his voice a tremor of disbelief. "You could have been hurt. You didn't even hesitate." Yibo, his own body aching, had simply shrugged, a carefully constructed mask of nonchalance. "I wasn't thinking," he had said, a lie he had told himself just as much as he had told Xiao Zhan. He couldn't explain the fierce, protective instinct that had driven him. He couldn't articulate the fear that had coursed through him at the sight of Xiao Zhan's fall, a fear so profound it had eclipsed all else. Xiao Zhan had simply nodded, but his eyes, deep and knowing, had seemed to understand the unsaid words. He had reached out, his hand gently touching the bruised skin on Yibo's arm. It was a fleeting, tender touch, but in that moment, it spoke volumes. It was a thank you that had nothing to do with words and everything to do with a shared, unspoken understanding. Yibo, holding the broken piece of helmet, realized that this wasn't just a story about a heroic rescue. It was a story about a bond forged in fear and sealed with unspoken gratitude. The thank you speech on the gala stage wasn't just a public statement, it was a promise. It was a promise that he would always be there, a silent guardian in the background, a source of courage when it was needed most. And in the broken plastic in his hand, Yibo found the perfect, silent symbol of that promise.